an atmosphere for corruption, which continues. Supplemented with the fact that there is money breeds corruption. There's lack of oversight because for a variety of reasons. So I don't want to keep harping on this idea that all of these problems, because at the end of the day, sure, there are problems, but the question is, how do we overcome these? What's the solution? And as you mentioned, we're going to come out with more questions than answers. It's really, they're not clear answers. But anyway, those are the 2 points.
So again, more questions from the audience.
I wonder, Sabrina went by mentioned Haitian art, which is, what we're familiar with through the Vassar Haiti Project. And it occurred to me from what you said about, Haiti being 100 years ahead of the rest of the world in terms of really dealing with slavery. And, the opposite, I don't know if there's a word that's the opposite of a prophecy. Prophecies take something early in time and it is cast future in time. But if we take our experience of Haitian art that we've been brought along with over the years here at Vassar, and take that spirit and say that is not a remnant of a great spirit from 1804, but it's the actual thing that explains the desire and the capability for freedom that happened early. So that the Haitian art that we experience through the project here is not only beautiful, but it's an explanation for a historical fact that is otherwise not explainable. Why, there's something distinct about the Haitian spirit that is articulated in the current art because the freedom movement in the very, very early 19th century.
Peter, thank you very much for raising that. Let me take the other 2 questions so that the audience can, so that the panel can have time to weigh in on that.
This is just something that hasn't been mentioned, and I'm just curious. I don't know much about it, but I'm curious as to what impact missionary work or destruction or aid, depending on how you look at it, has had on the cultural identity in Haiti.
Okay, so there's another gentleman, so let's
Yeah, sorry. My question is, you guys spoke about how corruption is a big issue, and that seems to be a big issue in general for global south, quote unquote. And so, I guess my question would be, given that's an internal problem, how would you, do any of you have any sense of how you go about tackling something like that in Haiti specifically, perhaps?
And, yeah.
So this is a question from Hassan, who is FaceTiming it right now.
You guys are tech savvy.
So he's asking if the agreement with the IMF is still in place, and if Haiti, or if Haiti could reinstate the tariffs on imports, and how that might impact the poor who are now reliant on the food that is being imported at this reduced price.
Yep. Okay, so we have about 4 different points to talk about it. If each of us can just take one of those points and speak on them rather than all of the points.
I'm actually gonna combine the first 2 because they're related. So I'll start by saying that not all of the art is Vodou art per se. However, I'm going to talk about Vodou because it's very important to understand what that is really, what it isn't, which is anything you've heard ever about voodoo is exactly what it's not. Okay, so Vodou is a cosmology. It's an all-encompassing culture and cosmology. When these Africans were enslaved in Haiti, what you had was a multitude of ethnic groups from different places, uprooted and forced together to undergo this common torturous scenario. And coming from these different ethnic groups, they were bound together and created a new common culture that was as much a product of this blend of African cultures. And in the Vodou cosmology, we say there are 21 of them, 21 nations. okay, that are strikingly well preserved in the rites of the Vodou. Some call it religion, but it's much bigger than religion. Cosmology, and in a very African way, reach into every aspect of life, right? So the sacred secular separation, you know, that's a European product. That's not something that characterizes African culture. And there is such a thing as African cosmology that transcends different cultures. I'm reminded of Foucault, actually. Kimban has a very difficult name. Kimbandende something something Foucault, who, African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo. Wow, I haven't read that book in a long time, 20 years. Okay, that's a good book. But it gives you a sense for there is some larger African cosmology which found a new home here and met another nature-based culture that had been wiped out by the genocide that Columbus started, right? The Native American culture that was already there on this island that had a name, Quisqueya, that had a name before, you know, they were wiped out. But what remnants of that culture were there, very, very nature-based and nature-respecting culture with its divinities and practices, now met and married, if you will, another family of very nature-based cultures. So something incredibly unique and powerful that binds the people together and actually, in many ways, characterizes how they see the universe, how they interact with the universe, and what emerges or exists in the imagination of that people is born. Missionaries are on a mission. They are people that are there doing what they do with a mission in mind. And it's an expansionist mission, just like the other colonial enterprises. So what happens in Haiti is everything that is African becomes bad. It's taboo, it's wrong, it's not how things are supposed to go. So black is bad, white is good. Vodou is bad, Catholic or Christian is good. Creole is bad, French is good. And so this is what shows up, and these are the forces that are fighting each other. Now, Vodou is fascinating because you'll hear that Haiti is, well, maybe 20 years ago it was 95% Roman Catholic, 100% Vodou. That was the saying. Now it's probably like 80% Catholic, like 15% Protestant / evangelical, and 100% Vodou. Okay? Because the Vodou culture, even for the most passionate fighters of the religion, the people who refuse to want to be associated with the religion, the cosmology, the culture, can't remove themselves from it because it gives who they are. You can't even speak Creole and not be in Vodou. It shows up, and it's very powerfully expressed in the art. So in terms of, is there some vision? I don't know if I would go so far as to say explanation, but I would certainly say there is a very profound essence of who these people are really and what Africa is really in a very powerful Pan-African way that you wouldn't have if history didn't happen the way it did, and it shows up. And then these are human beings just like you and me with dreams and hopes and aspirations. And so there is magic in that art.
I'll piggyback on that. My Creole class should know some of the music that we bring in class, because again, music gives you the culture, has a lot of the Vodou words, Papa Gede, right? Okay, I'm gonna quiz you next week. But I do want to say one thing about it. It's just not missionary work, it's in general, and that's to piggyback on what you were saying earlier. When you receive aid and you are forced to use the outside resources. So we had a joke, when I worked in Cité Soleil, we got USAID funds, and it was for public health, and we would get consultants, because we had to get consultants to evaluate us. And I remember a joke that we used to tell, and everybody laughed, but it was very serious, and we meant it as being disrespectful, but I don't know if they got it. But it was basically, I don't need to pay a consultant to come in my country, look at my watch, and tell me the time it is in their country. So that kind of gives you a sense. That being said, I don't think that the desire to help should be pushed away. Haitians will not ask for help. We have a lot of pride. But that being said, if somebody comes in goodwill, not to impose, but to help, Haitians also have a very hospitality is big, right? We welcome people. We love to welcome people. We'll feed you the very little that we may have, right? But it has to be genuine. Your assistance has to be genuine, and it has to be with respect of our culture. That's really the message. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of things. Growing up, I saw just a small little anecdote. I grew up in a near sugarcane fields, and sugarcane fields, or when they were very abundant in Haiti, were the site of voodoo ceremonies. And I grew up hearing voodoo ceremonies every single night. In fact, I've attended voodoo ceremonies on multiple occasions as a kid, just out of sheer curiosity. I would go, and as been pointing out, there's this idea of what voodoo, that it's like black magic, and it's some sort of, where people are killing roosters, and sure, there might be an element of that as well, but it's a cultural, voodoo is a cultural thing, and it is impossible to escape, as you've pointed out. It permeates every aspect of Haitian life. You cannot escape from it. In fact, there are people who will say voodoo's a terrible thing, and you look at the paintings on their wall, and it is Ave Loire. And you do realize that this is straight from voodoo, right? The music that they listen, they'll say lyrics sometimes, and without even realizing it.
Ça c'est déjà, pas toucher ça.
Yeah, exactly. Haitians are very superstitious, and it again because of the influence of voodoo, and again, not as a religion, but as a cultural identity, if you will. The good news, so to Creole, as you mentioned, there was a rejection for a long time about all these different aspects. The good news is that I think there's a movement to try to correct this. French was the official language in Haiti up until I don't know exactly when. Now it's French and Creole. There's more of an acceptance of voodoo as a culture. Exactly, so now it's the official religion. So there is good news, I guess is the point. So things are moving in the right direction. There was one question about the IMF agreement. No, so this was this agreement I don't believe still exists. I mean, there are other agreements that have superseded, that have supplemented, that are just as bad, exactly, or worse. Pick one. I mean, you can just go look into, and a lot of these are public knowledge. You can go and find the different grants, and you can even find the clauses that accompany these grants. Very few people ever take the time to read them because they're just vast manuals of gibberish, if you don't know your way around them. But yes, there's not that specific agreement in place, but there are other types of agreements. And one of the major ones in this has been, there's directly related to the Clinton Foundation, which is extremely controversial. You mentioned the name Clinton Foundation, and that you feel this kind of anger towards, because there has been, and I mean, there's not enough time to talk about what has happened and the reason why there's just this visceral reaction to the name Clinton, or in the Clinton Foundation. So a lot of agreements that have been placed, a lot of projects that have stemmed from the Clinton Foundation have caused tremendous damage over the years.
So let me, if there's any round of questions, let me take one round of questions, because I have promised Lila and Andrew that would round up and be out of here by 7:45 later. So is there one final round of question, and then everybody in the panel will get like a minute to respond?
Try to include corruption in your question.
Yes.
So we'll keep correction for the next round.
So there was actually one question
Yeah.
when somebody asked
So,
a
hey,
question.
Yes.
Yes.
Alright, you guys, I think this is my question.
No,
We got it, but the professor stopped us from talking.
Yeah, so, okay, this is, and they said it. They said if you put Asians around the table, see how passionate we are, and see how much. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're now sort of at the tail end. We're going to keep the corruption question, and then take maybe a couple of questions, and then we'll round up with the panelists having a minute to two to just round up and put final words. Any question? Okay, so anybody who hasn't asked questions yet, that will ask question or comments to make? Okay, so.
So you mentioned like structural changes that need to be made, and someone also talked about where do you get your contacts, and in regards to the recent happenings in Haiti, a lot of things will depend on what we've seen in the media, and how much of it was in the media relative to other facts related to like say the U.S. What we study right now. So I wanted to just ask, like in Haiti itself, how much education how much education is happening, and not just like formal education within the schools. We get the liberal arts education here, but like, is there something similar happening that adds on to the formal education to let people know that okay, like this is the history, this is the context, this is how we can drive the thought process moving forward in Haiti, and relating to the States, what would you say are like other ways to fight this like narrow line of news we see in the media?
Okay, so David?
Well, my question was, Vassar Haiti Project is very much local oriented. We don't deal with the government if we can avoid it, and that included when the earthquake took place. It was basically stay focused locally, which seems like an effective way to go about it. Curious as to the
I don't think we would be here if we didn't believe in the Vassar Haiti Project. Doing it the right way.
Yeah, last
So
question.
my question was sort of similar to Daniel's. It's that what can we do in the United States to stay informed? What can we do, especially for someone maybe who doesn't speak Creole or French? How can we try to stay informed about the situation and Haiti as much as possible?
And I'll go last question, and I'll give the panelists, and I'll watch. Absolutely, everybody has 2 minutes maximum. 2 minutes max.
2 minutes to address
Yeah,
That's impossible.
I know that's impossible. But this is. But the last question I want to throw. I don't want the panel to end up on a note where all we talk about is Haiti's problem. I know that Peter rightfully talked about the vibrant spirit of the Asian people. Again, just to talk about rays of hope, interesting, fascinating things that are going on that takes us from this gloomy picture. I mean, from 500,000 people, you have 10 million plus people. So one of the things that Asians have done is they've survived. They built a society that still, it's not a 19th century society, it's a 21st century society, and Haiti, like most colonized countries, have produced an immense range of talented people, some of which are contributing to upholding this country. What is it? You have a lawyer, you have a doctor, you have a doctor. So the list just keeps going. But again, something to send us home on a note that all of these wonderful people having come here this evening and say, gosh, our country is such a problem. Yeah, but to speak to the speed that they bring to BHP, but also the speed that goes into the country. Yeah.
Okay, well, I am a diehard optimist, but I also believe in calling a duck, right? So a few things. I don't have numbers. I know that in terms of, there's two pieces to your question. In terms of the educational opportunities, they are limited, for sure. I don't need numbers to know that. I know that the literacy numbers are quite low. I think a little bit over 60% last time I checked. Okay, something like this. There are opportunities, they don't compare to what they are in any high-income country, okay? However, that is irrelevant with respect to the question of, do Haitian people know their history? You won't meet a Haitian that doesn't know this history better than you. It's, you don't need formal education for that, it turns out, right? There's other education that's not formal. Lack of education is not, in my opinion, what has people in this situation, right? And yet it can be part of the solution, right? It's not going to be the kind of education we're getting in like these classrooms, because look at what we're dealing with here, right? So, I would say, maybe we'll speak offline, David, about your question, but I would say that I said this before, the movement that's happening right now is more than a ray of hope in my mind. This is deeply inspiring, because now you know who you're dealing with. There's problems. There's leadership missing, in my opinion. There's too much collateral damage, and so it's not happening in a way that, for example, is supporting the few hospitals that exist so they can take care of the casualties. However, the spirit that animates the people, that is demanding for accountability around corruption, it's happening. It's happening right now. It's not something to wait for. It's been happening actually since February 7th, which is the anniversary of Duvalier getting kicked out. Right? It's happening right now. So something new is happening. How do you keep informed about that? Well, it's much harder if you don't speak French. Much, much harder. It's possible. You can play with Google Translate. Jacqueline Shaw is a prolific journalist in Miami, the Miami Herald. Okay, so you can, if you're interested specifically in new, but you got to remember, anyone you read, anything you read, there is some context in the background, and challenge yourself to understand what is behind what I'm reading about, right? Because there is some angle, right? There is something you're probably going to read more about. This is not a knock, but it's sort of an example. You're probably going to read more about TPS in an article about Haiti here than you are in an article about what's going on in Haiti, right? And you want to notice things like that, right? And so think about what forces are operating. And that said, there are several news sources from Haiti. Some of the websites do provide translation. Unfortunately, I think the best ones don't. But know that you're not going to get it from an American news source typically. Certainly not from the New York Times. You're going to get a very particular picture of what's going on. Wall Street Journal, you're definitely going to get a very particular picture. It's going to be limited, and you'll be in the dark. You'll continue to be in the dark, right? Like whoever wants you to be in the dark, would have it. Okay.
I would suggest WOY magazine, WOY, WOY magazine. That's another good one. Actually, we have our students read that. It's WOY, WOY, but in Creole it's WOY, which is kind of your expression to say, I'm not even sure how you would translate that, but it's I don't think you can. But it's kind of an alert, like a wake-up call, or a cry. That might be another good one in the Haitian Tribune.
Yes.
Those would be three good ones. You're like on my favorites, so that's why I'm saying.
I think I'm way past my 2 minutes, right?
Yep.
Oh gosh. So I would echo that. I think formal education is limited. More importantly, it doesn't mean that there is no education. I think it's very informal. I think it's also our history is passed on. The folklore is very much alive. The music passes on, and so does the stories. So Haitians do know their stories. I think that I would echo your optimism in the fact that this is perhaps, I've lived through the Duvalier leaving, the Aristide coming. I mean, I was right there, and it's different than what I see now. There is a lot more awareness of and demand. It's it's also more widespread. It's the entire country. It's not just all France or Cape Haitian. It's kind of it's really widespread, and I think social media has something to do with it, which is awesome in a way, because Haitian, when I grew up, and I'm sure you would say the same, we didn't have TV. There was one station, national TV, that was it. That's if you could even have TV. That's besides the point. But all Haitians had was the radio, you know, and they listened to the radio. I mean, that was all over, right? You go to any corner of the country, and somebody would have a radio, and they would get around the radio listening. And so social media, I think, has changed. The number of outlets in Haiti right now is surprising. I mean, again, when I grew up, there was maybe, let's say, Feliz, you know, maybe 4 or 5 key station, maybe two newspaper. That was it. Now it's all over. It's all over in Haiti as well as outside. But the point being is, I think we're seeing a movement that we can capture that will make a change. And the diaspora is us, right? It's the Haitians that left. I always say there's 2 types of diaspora. There's the diaspora that sort of still has it in their heart, you know, if you touch Haiti ever, you always love it. It's just the way it is. But don't really see themselves going back or doing anything, you know, it's sort of kind of, you know, moved on. And then there's the diaspora who's still connected. And that group has a lot of opportunities right now to provide support, technical assistance, knowledge, brains. You know, I talk to my husband sometimes, okay, when the kids are all gone, we go back. Maybe we will. The point being is there is momentum. I'm very optimistic about that. And I think through that momentum, there might hopefully be opportunities for us to really move forward. That momentum has to do with corruption. And so when you talk about corruption, I will tell you again, personal story. So when I was working in Soleil, I worked for an NGO, Haitian NGO, but we had the money coming obviously from foreign aid. And we had a program where they would send us medicine. So you know, here you can't sell medicine that's gonna expire in 6 months, but it's still pretty much perfectly fine. So we would get containers of those medicine. We manage hospitals, and so we would distribute all over, right? So I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but the point being is when the container would come, I would go to actually get it out, and I would have to pay, quote unquote, to get it out. And it wasn't like I was giving money. It was, they wanted the medicine. They wanted, you know, and I used to say, oh, it's so corrupted. But as I grew up and as I think back, sometimes I reflect and I'm like, but you know what? They needed it, right? This was a way, so there's 2 levels of corruption. There's the elite corruption, the one that is in power, wants all the money, is gonna take all the money, and there's $1 million coming down to do 10 buildings, 20 buildings, and they're gonna take half of it, 3/4 of it, and there's only gonna be a little bit left to build 1 building. That's the elite corruption. Then there's the second layer, which people call corruption, and I've learned not to call it corruption. It is not, it is survival, which is the second layer where those are the ones on the ground who are barely making it. $2 a day is the average income per day, right? $2 a day. So they're barely making it. And there they are, and there is 20 cases of something that they don't even have at home. If they can hold a little power and a little negotiation and grab one of those, that's survival mode, right? That's how you survive. Is it corruption? Technically, black, white, you know? But practically, I've learned to look at it as, you know, would you do that if you had a decent salary?
So, I mean, I think these, you know, it's been we've had wonderful discussions, and there are so many elements that we could have touched upon, and just in closing, because I think they're intricately linked. You know, the idea of corruption, as you mentioned, and you raise a good point, like the elite corruption versus just your garden variety corruption. And I think one of the biggest problems in Haiti really is the elite corruption, because there are, today, the situation in large part remains the way it is because it benefits people in power and they do not want to see a change. And so, I started mentioning, the lack of access to education. I think it's a big problem. And I'm talking about not formal education, and even just education, learning how to read, it is a big impediment. I mean, you don't understand what illiteracy is, how big of a problem it is. If you go somewhere, imagine you can't read, how big of a problem. Sure, you have informal education, but formal education is a big obstacle to overcome. I think to one of the biggest solutions is access to education. I don't know exactly how you go about solving. It's not for a lack of schools. There are a lot of schools in Haiti. Unfortunately, they're not good schools because even the teachers a lot of times do not have are illiterate themselves. So it's a problem that has to start from very early on. And I think by starting there, I think a lot of the problems we can overcome a lot of problems. Now, having said that, there is hope. I think there is hope. As you mentioned, I think you say you're an optimist. I don't want to call myself an optimist, maybe bordering on pessimism, but I see the hope. Like, what's happening now is amazing. When this, I was actually in Haiti during the time when this whole uprising started, and it was interesting to me to see, because we've seen this before. We've seen these little moments, but they don't seem to last a very long time. There's like these little sparks, but this is prolonged. This is a sustained movement, and you can see it. This thing started several months or July ago, and it's ongoing. There's a recognition that there is a problem. There is a problem that we need to solve, and it's gonna come from everybody. It's gonna come, and I think doing panels like this, somebody mentioned, how I think it provides context to how to understand, because if you can't understand what's happening, you can't come up with solutions. Like, my whole career is to try to understand what's happening in the brain and whatever, but that's besides the point. It's very important to understand. It's very important to have the proper context. In terms of source, you've mentioned a few. I think they're very wonderful. And the impact of social media has been amazing, not just in Haiti, all over the world. Social media is, of course, a double-edged sword, but it's wonderful. It is a wonderful, because all of a sudden you have people who did not have access to information. Now they're getting access to information. And this movement, in large part, was driven because of social media. Facebook, where people were starting to post pictures of themselves. Where's the money? Where's the money? Where's the money? And at first, the government wasn't taking it very seriously, and then you could see like a snowball going and going and going and exploding into what we see today, and it's not gonna stop. It's not gonna stop. So there is hope. Hope is good. Haitians always have hope. Haitians always know that the sun is gonna rise tomorrow. No matter how bad things are, you will wake up tomorrow. And so.
Thank you, Arida. I'm going to end up on two notes. So the first note that I'm going to end up with is when Toussaint overtook Louverture, had been tricked and was captured by the French and was being taken to Alsace. He said something, I think, that successive generation of Haitians have latched onto. He says, today you've cut down part of the tree of liberty, but it would grow deep, and it would grow again. And again, this is a sign of optimism. This is why, as a nation, in spite of sort of all of the challenges, Haiti remains a vibrant society that continues to surprise and renew itself in all kinds of ways. And as Peter said, when we see Haiti, especially when VHP, you have this wonderful moment when you come, we are all awashed in the artistry and sort of the beauty. The Asian people compels us to see the world in multicolored and in very lively and very optimistic ways. So that's the first thing. Second, again, and this is a thank you to all of you who are in this room and have come. Again, if we perceive Haiti as a place that perpetually needs help, or that we should go help, I think we would miss the point. And I'm glad that Roger, Sabrina, and Ernest found the time not only to come and speak for Haiti, but to show you who Haitians are in very diverse and sort of very profound ways. And I don't think they're here to ask for help. What is important as we talk about in this campus, a global, interconnected world, I think the word that is missing out of our vocabulary that we need to try to recover again is solidarity with people. When you look at people as people who need help, you have to be careful, because if you don't take care, they begin to slip in your scale of humanity, that these are people. But if you look at people in which your humanity is deeply also invested in, not only in idealistic way, but in real ways. You don't know the hospital that you might go one day in which my good friend here will be looking at your brain and what's going on. So in that particular way, Haiti is not a distant place. Is that all of those centuries and all of those generations of investment and work becomes manifest in your life in ways that are very apparent and real. And I hope that we keep that in mind, and that becomes the way for engagement. And with the wonderful work that Andrew, Lila, and all of you have been doing on this campus to keep Haiti on the map and in front of us. So thank you, Lila. Thank you to the VHP team, and all of you guys who have been patient. It's Friday evening. What are you guys doing here? Well, you're Vassar students, which means that this is important. Well, thank you to the panel. Thank you, Roger.
I wish this panel went on until midnight. I don't know if everybody else feels that way, but I'm very humbled to be in your presence. Thank you for giving up your Friday nights. You're driving from Boston, from New York, from Poughkeepsie. Thank you all for coming. You know, Haiti lives in us. And you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and all of you really showed us what's possible. And I'm very moved by tonight's panel. You know, it was dreamed up by students because we couldn't go to Haiti. And, you know, we realized like Haiti is just such, it's not poor and desperate. It's just a teaching tool for us to really see how can we make this world and ourselves better. And you all have done such a beautiful job tonight. Thank you so much for coming.